hello, hello, hello check, hello, I check, hello, hello, hello check, hello.
Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 check, hello, 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 check, hello. Hello, 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 check, 1, 2, check, hello, 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 hello. Hello, check, hello, 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 check, 1, 2, check, hello, 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 check, hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, mic check, hello, check, hello. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, mic check, hello, hello, check, 1, 2, 3, hello, check, hello, hello.
Good evening, everyone. So there is one request. Whenever sir asks for some particular question, please raise your hands and we will provide you mics and then you can ask your question, okay? So that it becomes easy for everybody to comprehend the question, right? Okay, thank you.
I don't have to ask the question, you have to.
नहीं आंसर अगर उनको करना भी है
टाइम वेस्ट नहीं दो हाँ ठीक है मतलब माइक्स वाले बंदे क्या बता दो ना माइक के लिए कोई है
खड़े में वो हाथ खड़ा कर देंगे क्वेश्चन करने के लिए आंसर करने के लिए दोनों के लिए हाथ खड़ा कर देंगे वो सर ने बोला है प्रोडक्शन के लिए थोड़ा कैप्चर करना है रिस्पॉन्स लगवा देते हैं
नहीं लगाना
नहीं लगाना
वो बस जस्ट ये केस पूछ रहा हूँ रिस्पॉन्स क्योंकि टाइम
नहीं स्टूडेंट्स रिस्पॉन्स नहीं है लेकिन अगर कुछ कम्युनिकेट करना है उसके लिए ठीक है
करें सर
Good evening, class. So you know what the class is? क्या expectation क्या है? नहीं PT-365 में क्या होगा? What? See, this is a revision document. If you have already covered the monthly current affairs, this is just a concise form of the monthly current affairs. So there is nothing different here. From all the magazines, from May till recently, whatever we think is important, that has been given in this document for you to revise. It does not include the main topic and it also does not include the analysis of any of the topics. So there's nothing different that is going to happen here. We have 4 classes to discuss this document, and the pattern of the class, I'll take each and every topic which is there for understanding. At some parts, the topic has not given a lot of information. If I have some information to share, I'll use the PPTs. You just go through the PPTs. And at every point, I'll tell you why the topic is important, what type of a question will be asked, or what the probability is. What type of question can be framed from a particular topic. We are not going to do the complete economics. At some parts, we are going to discuss the conceptual parts which are related to the topic. But we are not going to do any economics here. Basic terms, we are not going to discuss anything. That is covered in your regular batches, or also if you are reading from whatever source. So basic economics will not be covered. Something related to these topics, definitely we'll discuss. Is the idea clear? I'll start with the first topic. That is GDP estimation in India. Now, why this topic was in news, there were certain issues with respect to the third quarter growth, 7.8%. There were certain commentators which said that the GDP growth rate of 7.8% is not the real number. There is a certain problem in the number because GDP, when calculated through 2 different methods, the growth rate is different. So what exactly? They've discussed the basic idea of GDP. I'll give you the current relevance so you understand what exactly the problem was. Now GDP can be measured through what all methods? There are 3 methods. By adding the incomes, by calculating the total expenditures, or value add, that is production. All of the 3 will give the same number. If something is produced, someone is going to get income, and that income is going to be spent. The circular flow, all of the 3 identities will be equal, whether you measure it through production, income, or expenditure method. Now, India calculates GDP through what method? We calculate, 2015 we changed the methodology of GDP. Mains mein they asked a question, what was the change in methodology? So we calculate by what method? कौन सा figure calculate होता है इंडिया में? Is it expenditure? Are we measuring GDP through expenditure method? Is it income method? Current affairs क्या पढ़ने आए हो? You revise GDP first. This is the method which is used. GVA at basic prices. 2015, this is income method, measures it at factor cost. And this is market. In India, the estimation of GDP happens through the production method, where we shifted from the index of industrial production to Ministry of Corporate Affairs 21 database, where we calculate what the output was of the industries, what their input cost was. The difference between the two becomes their value add, which is based on consumption. This can give you an idea whether the people exited poverty or not. Here, based on any indicator, you are having a cumulative score. So even if people have exited on this score, you don't know whether they are still poor or not. If on this score, they are say, we set a deprivation score ke 3 indicators pe he should be not be deprived. Now he's deprived on 2. That means according to this definition, he's not multidimensional poor. But can you say for sure that he is not poor? At the national level, what is the status of poverty we'll never be able to know if we don't have the poverty line. Because this is telling us whether people exited or not. And this is going to tell me if poverty is 20% or poverty is 40%, my priorities should be different. But if the deprivation for number of people go from 3 to 2, I don't know what the state of poverty is. So we need a combination of two. Plus also, this would have a lot of problems in data collection. People, if know that this data collection is being used for targeting of poverty, they will have no incentive to give the true numbers here. Everybody is going to under-report their numbers on this. Because if they know that the numbers here are linked to the benefits of the government, there is no incentive to tell the truth. But poverty line is based on the NSSO consumption expenditure survey, which is a sample survey. People don't know what exactly the sample survey is being used for. So here under-reporting might not happen, here under-reporting will happen. Because they know the schemes are linked to what responses they record. And also this survey will take a lot of resources and cost to conduct. This is a cheap mechanism to estimate poverty. This is why we need a combination of both so that we have better policies. On the national level, you know what the state of poverty is and granular information where exactly to target. For example, I show you how NFHS has shown that housing is a very big problem. Drinking water is a very big problem. So now I need to focus on these two specifically. And national, what should my transfers be, can be calculated based on this. So what should be the national policy agenda comes from poverty line. Specific targeting can happen through this. This is why we need a combination of both, not alone will do. This is why socio-economic caste census was not the best mechanism to target poverty. You needed to know what exactly the poverty line was. Right now we don't have poverty line numbers because the 2017, the consumption expenditure survey was not done or was not accepted by the government. Is the idea clear? Multidimensional poverty index and what is the scope of this topic? You should know the indicators for both global and the Indian national multidimensional poverty index. This is not very important to remember the deprivation cutoff score. This is quite in-depth, this would not be asked, ज़्यादा probability यहाँ पे है. Is the idea clear? And how it is calculated and what it is calculating? It is calculating both the incidence of poverty and intensity of poverty. This is how it is calculated. Head count ratio, intensity and multiplication of both is your multidimensional poverty index, which I just explained. नहीं, ये बता चुका हूँ मैं. पढ़ने का टाइम वैसे नहीं देना है. The indicators, this is the information which you can use in your answers in mains. एक बहुत prominent question है, कितना data करें newspaper से. This is a consolidated data on 10 indicators. So it will help you write better answers in paper 2 and paper 3. The comparison over the years, NFHS 4 and NFHS 5. The headcount ratio across various states. Bihar at 51.89% of people who were multidimensional poor. Now it is 33.76. Chief Minister ने party change किया तो कम हो गया. So based on that National Family Health Survey, this is the recorded data. Otherwise also it has improved because all the indicators have seen improvement. Maximum problems. This can be a probable question, the finding. Cooking fuel. Recorded the maximum and also housing. These two are the poorest indicators, and this is the uncensored headcount ratio. That means it is calculating the deprivation of all population. When it is a censored, that means only multidimensional poor ka deprivation. This is deprivation for all population, maximum cooking fuel and housing. So these two could be a probable question, that which all indicators India is maximum deprived. It's housing and cooking fuel. Sanitation was a problem, has seen significant improvements. Calculating it in the censored headcount ratio, that means those who are poor, then we are calculating their average deprivations. This also gives us the intensity. That was for the complete population. This is for only those who are multidimensional poor. That means they are past the cutoff score. Overview of states and UTs, how they have increased headcount. Just a rough overview. This is not important from the prelims perspective. Most of this data is important for the mains perspective. Prelims perspective में सिर्फ ये important है, what is the idea of multidimensional poverty index and what are the indicators, what is the score, how exactly that is calculated. Calculating household microdata, unit level for NFHS, base 4 and 5, International Institute for Population Sciences, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. These are the probable topics from this for question. Is the idea clear? Now the next topic is so the whole findings have also been explained here. I've given a broader overview so that you can use all of this in mains also. Direct benefit transfer. Probability of question is less, but you just need to know the idea. Why is direct benefit transfer better than indirect transfers? The whole idea you need to understand is that the government is preferring the direct benefit transfer mode for most of its scheme by using the architecture of Jan Dhan, opening a bank account, using Aadhaar authentication and mobile access of bank through mobile phones. So Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile to do direct benefit transfers. Now why are direct benefit transfers better, and government has saved a lot of money through direct benefit transfers? Leakages. Because the problem in indirect subsidy, the idea of indirect subsidy is that these are in-kind transfers which are given to anyone in the supply chain. And it is expected that the beneficiary is going to get the subsidized product. In the case of direct benefit transfer, it is in the form of cash directly going to the beneficiary's bank account. Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile make that possible. Now if this is the case, why this is a problem? Because when you make in-kind transfers, that means that product has one market price and one price at which the government wants to sell. For example, fertilizer has a market price. The government is asking the manufacturers to sell at one price. For example, rice and wheat have one price. The PDS shops are selling at one price. So there is an indirect subsidy where the beneficiary receives the subsidized product. Now the problem in this is the moment you have two prices for the same product, you have an incentive for leakage. That means the intended beneficiary will not get the benefit because there is an incentive for leakage. For example, the PDS ration could be sold for an open market price. The beneficiary might not get the benefit. And since there is a very big opportunity for leakage, the government has to monitor this whole leakage, which increases its resources for administration of the subsidy. Now government has to provide a mechanism so that this leakage does not happen. The intended beneficiary is actually getting the grains. For example, if you see the PDS chain, what happens in the PDS chain? The FCI takes the grains from the farmer, and this is why MSP is not a subsidy for farmer, MSP is a subsidy for consumer. They pay the farmer MSP and they take the crop. But they sell this crop at a lesser price to the state. The state provides through the fair price shop and through the beneficiary. Now see how exactly this thing works out, that why direct benefit transfers will be better. First, the government has to do the procurement. The government has to do procurement. The government also has to do the distribution. Plus the state government have to make sure that the fair price shop owner is not cheating the beneficiary. They have now a system of Aadhaar authentication plus electronic point of sale machine to record each and every transaction. Aadhaar authentication whether through thumbprints or through iris scan. Now all of these mechanisms mean significant cost for center and also significant cost for state. And as per the Shanta Kumar panel in 2014, 40% of the grains were leaked into the open market. That means we are spending huge amount of money in the whole subsidy mechanism, and we are also doing the administration and monitoring of the chain. Significant subsidy, and still 40% of the grains are leaked. So problems at both ends, spending the money and also the beneficiary not receiving it. Same thing with urea or whatever subsidy the government is giving, electricity subsidy. Government is saying for free. You have leakages, that electricity being used for other purposes. Administration, again a cost. It is not going to the beneficiary and the cost. So why not the government just transfer money in the account of the beneficiary and let him buy from the open market? This is what is the biggest benefit of DBT. The government will not have to intervene in the supply chain. The government will save a lot of cost in all of the supply chain. Giving money directly to the beneficiary, the leakage will also be stopped. There can still be leakage if the government does not identify the beneficiary properly. But वो यहाँ भी हो सकती है. Fake ration cards could be a problem here, and database inclusion could be a problem here. So both have problem of people who should not be getting the subsidy are getting it. So this is why this mechanism is much more efficient than this mechanism. This is why the government is trying to shift to this. It has certain challenges that you should give. There will be two major challenges. Is the idea of indirect and direct clear? Why indirect is a problem and why direct solves that problem? Only two issues major in direct subsidies. That one is whether your transfer will be linked to inflation or not. You promised a subsidy of say 100 rupees or 150 rupees for rice and wheat, but the price of rice and wheat has increased in the market. If that has increased in the market, they will not be able to buy. For example, the government transfers 6,000 rupees to the farmers. All land holding farmers are getting 6,000 rupees. There are certain exclusion criteria. All farmers are getting 6,000. If all are getting 6,000, the question is what exactly are they going to do with 6,000? If the transfer is not linked to inflation, the real benefit to the beneficiary is not significant. And secondly, even if you are giving money, there has to be a product market. What if there is no product available? Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile, they are trying to solve the problem of financial inclusion and financial access. Now if that is solved, I have the money in my bank account, I've also got the money because of the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile, but what if the product is not available in the market? What if there are no retail points where I can buy the product, whether it is urea or it is food grains? In case of electricity is why the farmers complained, they are hell-bent against Electricity Amendment Act, because the government is trying to bring this also there. Now if this happens, what transfer the government does and what is the price of electricity, there can be a huge gap. So your transfer should be linked to inflation and there should be a product market. These are the two major challenges which you have to solve, then only you can provide direct benefit transfers. Financial inclusion access the government is solving through Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile. Database identification remains a problem here, The inclusion exclusion errors that can happen in the database, whether some people who should be getting are not getting, and those who should not be getting are getting. These two types of errors can happen in both databases. This is the idea of direct benefit transfer. You should know the conceptual difference between the two. Business correspondent model. What do you understand by business correspondence? The business correspondent infrastructure. UPSC had a full-fledged question on business correspondence. Rest terms are easy here. You understand what are payment banks? Only two type of activities they can do. They can take deposits up to 2 lakh rupees and they can provide payment services, no loans. What is business correspondent?
सर बेसिकली पर्सन होते हैं बैंक मित्र जो सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड करवाते हैं बैंक की घर घर जाके.
The whole idea here is financial inclusion. Now if you are establishing a bank branch, this is going to be highly resource intensive, cost intensive. Now better is hire a bank mitra or bank sathi who will provide the services of the bank, remote access, by visiting each and every house. And one bank correspondent can provide services for multiple banks. This is the step the government has taken, and there has been number of measures taken to improve the banking correspondent model so that there is better financial inclusion. Direct benefit transfer ke liye you will have to provide mechanisms so that people can withdraw money from their bank account. This banking correspondent is a model moving away from branch-led to employee-led, where remote services can be provided by a employee of the bank. They can provide services for multiple banks, and they can provide all types of banking services. They will collect the money, deposit it on the bank account on the behalf of the depositor. So they can provide all types of services. This is the idea of business correspondent. Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile along with business correspondent is what is going to bring the financial inclusion to make direct benefit possible. Self-help groups. What is the idea of self-help groups? This is a question which was asked this year prelims also. The topic important here is the scheme which the government has launched. 2 crore women under the Lakpati Didi scheme. Now what exactly is the idea? Scheme ka 4 parameters which you have to remember here. One is launched by what ministry, objective and the feature. One more, eligibility criteria or target population. So you have ministry, the objective and the feature of the scheme. The model which they are using is the self-help group. What is the basic idea of self-help group? This was the question in 2023. The motive was poverty alleviation. Poverty alleviation by not providing directly jobs. Now one is government can provide jobs in public works. That is the scheme of Manrega. The other is the government can provide opportunities for self-employment. People creating jobs for themselves. Self-employment can be of 2 categories. One are those which employ people and the other are those which are own account workers. Those who are not employing anyone. Those who employ people, those who don't account anyone. Now if you have to start a business either yourself without taking help or even if you are having a startup, what exactly are the things you need? For self-employment, what are the things needed? One is capital and the other is skill. This is where self-help group becomes highly important. The government faced a problem that giving capital to individuals was not leading to any repayments. There was high rate of default when the capital was provided to individuals. Learning from the Grameen Bank experience of Bangladesh, Mohammad Yunus, the government established the self-help group approach. There are 3 major activities in a self-help group. First is the group formation. With the help of local bodies, NGOs and other cooperatives, a group of 5, 10, 15, 20 people is brought together. This group is a formal grouping, it is not an informal group. This group in most cases is registered as a cooperative society. It is registered as a trust or a cooperative society. The second thing that happens in this group formation is that they will be taught to save, that is provide a certain financial skill. Revolving savings together, they will be provided certain financial skill, how to manage finances. And this is where the intervention of the government was very important. They linked it to banks. NABARD in 1992 created an infrastructure where it forced the banks to provide money to self-help groups. This is the most famous self-help group bank linkage program. UPSC has asked multiple questions on this in mains. What is the self-help group bank linkage program? So when you start a group, you inculcate the habit of savings and management of finances, then you link them to a bank where RRBs and other cooperative banks provided significant money to them because of this body. UPSC asked this statement that this NABARD bank linkage program was started by SBI. It is not correct, it was started by NABARD. The second thing is, why this mechanism is better than providing it to individuals, that when you are part of a group, the liability of the loan is of the group. The liability of the loan is not on a single person. There is another mode of lending which is the joint lending group. Sometimes bank, to increase the number of loans, they create a group of people called as the joint lending group, but joint lending group has independent liability. It is not the liability of the group. Self-help group are different, that the liability is of the group. That peer-to-peer pressure will make the repayment very high. Individuals were not paying back the loans, repayment rates will be high if there is certain group discipline. The whole idea of microfinance, the Grameen Bank experiment in Bangladesh, was that 90% above were repayment rates when the loan was given to a group as compared to individuals. Individuals may repayment discipline is very bad, group may it is not because of the peer group pressure. The third activity why bank linkage has been given is the provision of an economic activity. Once they start saving and they get a bank linkage credit, the government is going to provide them opportunities to start an economic activity. For example, in the Lakpati Didi scheme, you are skilling for plumbing, LED bulb making, operating and repairing drones. This economic activity the government tries to make as sustainable as possible. In fact, the broader scheme of self-help group, that is the National Rural Livelihood Mission, provides continuous skilling, provides continuous marketing and branding support so that this activity is not one-time activity, it becomes a sustainable and provides a certain income. And the moment you have regular income, this is where the whole life will change. Economic empowerment, social empowerment, political empowerment, because the moment you have income, the status in the society improves. Since mostly it is linked to the class, the status improves because you are having additional income. The moment you have additional income, your say in the family, your say in the community increases. This is why a most effective mechanism for two things, poverty alleviation and women empowerment, because most of these self-help groups are formed by women. The whole idea was moving from individual self-employment to group-based self-employment. Bank linkage program ensured by NABARD. This is the idea of self-help groups. Now the government has a name, encouraged to start micro enterprises, the same thing. Name is changed, 2 crore women, 1 lakh annual income we are going to make for them through a micro enterprises. The government is not going to make them directly, the government is going to provide the capital and the skill level so that they can sustain their economic activity. Because giving work through Manrega or any other public work programs is not sustainable in the long run. The government cannot create jobs for maximum amount of population. The government can create conditions for empowerment. And most of the government schemes right now for poverty alleviation are self-employment only. Whether it is the PM Vishkarma scheme, it is the Stand Up India scheme, Swanidhi scheme, Mudra loans, everyone targets the same thing, that is, this is the most important thing for any business opportunity, self-employment. Stand Up India mein, they target women, SC and STs for providing capital. Mudra loans, small ticket loans for capital. Swanidhi, street vendors getting capital so that they can create livelihood for themselves. And mostly this. Startup India yahan pe hai. Big businesses is this. Mostly microfinances, own account enterprises, start work for yourself. If you make it quite big enough, you can also employ. This is the idea of self-help group, the most effective scheme for poverty alleviation. Significance starts with money making, connect to a bank, empowerment, capacity building, alleviation of poverty, increase in income, decline in share of informal loans. Why self-employment is important from the government? Because informal money lending is quite expensive and exploitative. The repayment or the methods used to get the money back is also not safe. Major initiatives to promote self-help group, the major scheme is the NRLM scheme, National Rural Livelihood Mission. Most of these programs are subsets of NRLM. Maximum in rural areas it is NRLM and in urban areas it is National Urban Livelihood Mission. The whole focus area is self-help group. Bank linkage has already been provided. How further we can help them? Because the problem what self-help groups face is, in the initial years they can start a micro enterprise. But how can they expand their business? They don't have opportunities to expand their business beyond a point because they don't have marketing skill, they don't have money for branding, or they don't have money for getting a better technology. So NRLM has been enhanced to provide all regular support for these businesses to sustain themselves. Self-help group ka problem ye hai, how exactly do they scale? And when they scale, will they remain as a group-led activity that was a cooperative society, or will they have a corporate structure that is business? This is the secondary aspect of self-help group, that what exactly are the challenges they face. Challenges they face is sustaining the movement, that is sustaining the business. The government through these programs can help sustain the business. But when the business becomes big, now you need a proper corporate structure. If you need a corporate structure, the whole benefits of self-help group will be diluted. So they face a roadblock on transitioning from a low-income business to a high-income business. Whether it is Kudumshri in Kerala, Jivika in Bihar, all of them face the same problem. That how exactly do we scale the business beyond a point without getting into the corporate structure? Maintaining the cooperative society, because the biggest difference between cooperative society and the corporate structure is that is the decision-making power. Cooperative society, all the members have equal decision-making powers. One member, one vote. In a corporate structure, those who have given more money to the company, they will have more voting power. So, democratic management, hierarchical management. So this is the difference, what the problem self-help group will face in the second stage of development. First stage of development is sustaining the business, which NRLM will help. This is the idea of self-help group. Same the self-help group bank linkage program, providing loans. NABARD, self-help group bank linkage program. This was a statement asked in the prelims last year. What is the idea of microfinance? Microfinance in India. Report title. See, report is important for mains mostly. But what is the important thing for prelims is, what is the definition of microfinance? What is microfinance? Small ticket loans. Anything else? So how do you define small ticket loans? And it is for whom?
Sir, providing loan without collateral.
Yes, microfinance is providing loans. Two things are important. Microfinance tells small ticket loans. Two things are important here. One, it is a collateral free loan, and it is for low income households only. Earlier there were different criteria for urban and rural areas to classify whether they are eligible for microfinance or not. Now it is same. 3 lakh rupees per annum is the income which you need to have to avail microfinance. Anyone having annual income more than 3 lakh rupees, whether in rural or urban areas, they will not be qualifying for a microfinance loan. A collateral free loan coming either from the bank or another entity, that is NBFC, microfinance institution. Special institutions working for this purpose. Two major criteria hoga microfinance, and these institutions provide all types of microfinance services. Microfinance is not just microcredit, it is micro savings, micro insurance. All types of financial services on a small scale can be provided under microfinance. It's not just about micro loans, micro savings up to say 500,000 rupees. Small savings can also be taken by these institutions. The idea is collateral free loan and low income households. For eligible for this loan, you need to have annual income not more than 3 lakh rupees. Earlier it was 1 lakh in rural areas, 1.6 in urban. Now it's the same for both, 3 lakh rupees as the income criteria. What could be the biggest problem in microfinance institutions? They're not very successful. Repayment rates are very poor with microfinance. It's very difficult to ascertain the feasibility of giving the loan, the credit worthiness of the borrower, because you are giving a loan without a collateral. And since you are giving loans to low income households, you need very efficient risk management strategies. Repayment rates are very poor. Microfinance mostly are successful when they are given to a group, that is self-help group. Given to individuals, they always create problems. This is why microfinance institutions are not very effective. The loan amount can be high, but microfinance, check karna. NPA has decreased, period performance तो हो ही सकता है. Regularly क्या problem है? Gross NPAs definitely could have decreased, इसलिए भी कि loan ही कम दे दिए. So many things can happen. So this is not the true picture. I'm just talking about in general. Loan कम हो सकता है. दूसरा, I can write off the NPA as loss also. Then also the gross NPAs could decrease. Doesn't mean the repayment rates are high.
जिसका 5 लाख वो थोड़ी बताएगा मेरा 5 लाख है, तो 3 लाख से कम दिखाकर लोन ले सकता है. सर, किसी के पास अगर 3 लाख मतलब 5 लाख की इनकम पर एनम है, तो 3 लाख के नीचे दिखा के भी तो लोन ले सकता है ना. ये भी तो प्रॉब्लम है.
बैंक मान जाएगा?
तो विदाउट कोलेटरल है ना, तो
विदाउट कोलेटरल है तो बैंक विल रिक्वायर योर इनकम प्रूफ. इफ यू आर नॉट एबल टू सेटिस्फाई दैट, बैंक विल नॉट गिव अ लोन.
तो यहाँ भी तो प्रॉब्लम है, आप पूरी तरह से अगर सेटिस्फाई अगर कर पाए.
हाँ, तो नहीं दिया तो लोन ही नहीं जाएगा. यू अंडरस्टैंड? कोई भी बैंक लोन बिना आपका इनकम प्रूफ 3 साल का ITR के बिना तो कोई बैंक नहीं देखेगा भी नहीं. The number of other proofs also which the bank can ask for estimating what the income is, and if you are successfully fooling the bank, फिर तो repayment है ही नहीं. Yes, 1.25 lakh is the maximum loan you can take. 1.25 lakh is the loan limit. Earlier it was 1, now it is 1.25 lakh, the loan limit. Yes. See, microfinance activity can be done by anyone. The activity's annual income should be less than 3 and loan should go with less than this. Small finance banks, the idea is that they should be covering those people who are underserved or unserved. It could be anyone. This is why the condition for priority sector lending for them is 75%. So they can give microfinance also. At the end of the day, microfinance, NBFC is a separate category, but all of these banks can provide. Those who can give loans, RRB, small finance bank, anyone can provide microfinance. In fact, small finance bank, cooperative banks and RRBs, they are the ones which provide the maximum microfinance. Individual. RBI. Low income household.
Some mercantile banks are specially for microfinances, or can they give big loans?
Which one?
Mercantile banks.
What are mercantile banks?
For the people who are like with low incomes in the city, in the urban areas.
We don't have a separate criteria by the name of mercantile banks. Either it is a commercial bank, a cooperative bank or a small finance bank which can give loans. अब वो किस बैंक के पास है? स्पेशल कोई कैटेगरी का लाइसेंस नहीं है RBI के पास फॉर मर्केंटाइल बैंक्स. इट कुड बी इधर अ कोऑपरेटिव और अ कमर्शियल. कोई भी एक्टिविटी परफॉर्म कर सकता है एज अ माइक्रो फाइनेंस. क्राइटेरिया शुड बी लेस देन 3 इनकम, देन यू विल गेट अ कोलेटरल फ्री लोन.
Also, there's a bank called Bombay Mercantile Bank. So
बॉम्बे नाम है ना, तो फिर इट कुड बी अ कोऑपरेटिव बैंक, अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक और अ रूरल कोऑपरेटिव बैंक. Specific license for mercantile banks are not present. 3 type of licenses: cooperative, commercial, and commercial में you have payment bank and small finance bank. RRBs which are set by the government, because RRB में you have center, state and sponsor. Sponsor is the PSU. तो special कुछ mercantile banks का there's no separate license. The name could be mercantile bank, वो शायद cooperative होगा. Is the idea of microfinance clear?
So you said that micro loans are more successful when given to a group, right?
कहाँ से आवाज आ रही है?
So
Okay, yes. हाँ हाँ.
So you said that micro loans are more successful when given to a group, right? So how is the income of a group gauged?
Self-help group providing an economic activity, we provide them a small ticket loan. This criteria is for individual income households. Broadly, we say self-help group have been provided microfinance linked to the bank providing small loans. Group की income activity नहीं है. Individual household को when we provide, that individual household should have an income of 3 lakh. Group पे there is no criteria. Self-help group otherwise also are not limited to microfinance. Self-help group can get a big loan also. So there is no limit on self-help group to get a small loan. It's on an individual borrower up to 3 lakh can take a collateral free loan. This is the idea.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Second is your fiscal policy. Now this is an important topic in terms of RBI every year doing a study of budgets of the state government. This year the report has been titled Revenue Dynamics and Fiscal Capacity of the States. This is where I'll give you a number of information on 2 things. One, the classification of the budget, what are the income sources, what are the expenditure, and second, what is the performance. This becomes important because the questions are mostly based on trends. That what exactly has been the trend of fiscal deficit of the states in the last few years? What has been the trend on revenue expenditure? What has been the trend on capital expenditure. What exactly is the components of debt of the state government? What are the sources of non-tax revenue for the state governments? All of those classification and performance. Plus this report has talked about multiple changes also which have been brought by states which can be used for answers in mains. Number of state governments have brought in reforms for improving their tax administration, both the tax collection in terms of the direct and indirect taxes and also the non-tax revenue. So what changes they have brought in, that can be used here also, can be asked in prelims also. Probability is less, but major probability is getting a question on classification and performance of the states on this classification. Now what exactly the states have done in the previous few years in budget? And this is a cumulative study. First is with respect to the trends in deficit. See, all of this PPT, what you have to do is, I'll just explain in brief what exactly the trend you have to notice. So with this document, in every PPT, every slide, you just write down what the observation is. So before the exam, you don't have to go through the numbers, you just need to know what the trend is. Steadily increasing, steadily decreasing or not. Note down the observation. For example, if the question is, the gross fiscal deficit of the states has been steadily increasing in the past 5 years. Now what has the trend been in the past 5 years? 2017-18, 18-19 no change, slight increase, but the pandemic year saw a very big increase from 2.6 to 4.1. So whenever we solve trend questions, we try to find an anomaly here. In the past 5 years, was there an anomaly in one of the years or not? That is going to help you solve the questions. But otherwise also, if you have an idea about the data, you have a better answer to, better ways to solve the answer. क्योंकि anomaly यार हर बार शायद नहीं मिला. 4.1 to 2.8, situation improving. Then again 3.2, increasing from 21 to 23. Now 22-23 to 23-24, again a decrease. Revised estimate में बड़ा है, but budget estimates में it has shown a decrease. So what the trends you observe in the deficit, whether it is fiscal, primary or revenue, the trends have to be observed for all the data that is present here. You find an anomaly here, the pandemic lockdown year, you get to know steady increase, steady decrease nahi hai. But otherwise also you should know in the last 2-3 years what exactly has happened. The revenue deficit, same thing, increasing, significant jump 2019-20 to 2021. Total fiscal deficit. What is the idea of gross fiscal deficit? Fiscal deficit is the total borrowings of the government. Then what is gross fiscal and net fiscal deficit? Total borrowings, that is gross. What is net fiscal deficit? Interest payments. Interest payments तो अगर हटाओगे तो, sorry, primary. What is the difference between gross and net fiscal deficit? This is how the documents have to be read. Revise your basics along with watch the performance. This is why I said classification understanding is very important. Gross and net.
So जब इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट लास्ट ईयर की हट जाती है तो उसको नेट फिस्कल डेफिसिट बोलते हैं.
That is, what is primary deficit then?
When gross fiscal, when we exclude the loans given by central government to the state government for the creation of capital asset.
Not creation for capital asset, any loan. Whichever entity is giving a loan, that will be your gross to net. So if the center government, we are calculating gross fiscal deficit and net fiscal deficit, we'll subtract the loans given by center. If the state government has given loans to any entity, gross would be total borrowings, subtract the loans, that would be net borrowings. This is the difference between gross fiscal deficit and net fiscal deficit. It is not about interest payment. Interest payment is primary deficit. Revenue is clear? Revenue is expenditure minus receipt. Effective revenue deficit, that is revenue deficit minus grants given to states for capital expenditure. See, here there is no distinction of capital expenditure. Loan given to any entity, whether capital expenditure or not, that will give you the net fiscal deficit, not the gross. Gross will be total borrowings. So the trends in all of this, gross, revenue and primary deficit. This is the same fiscal, the gross fiscal deficit performance of the states. How much the limit was specified. Now there are limits to how much center can borrow, the states can borrow. Are there limits to how much states can borrow? Why? FRBM. Is it about FRBM? FRBM, they can always postpone. One of the things is, it's not FRBM, it is in fact, every state government has passed a fiscal responsibility legislation just like the FRBM at center. So one discipline on them is through the fiscal responsibility legislation which the state governments have themselves passed. The other limitation on them comes from the Article 293. Article 293 says, if any of the state governments have taken money from the center, they cannot borrow from the market without the permission from the center. And this is what Article 293 says is, no state can borrow externally. They can borrow externally only after the permission of center. So two things here, whatever borrowing they have to do, they have to take permission if state has taken a loan from the center. There is a condition. If there is no loan you have taken from the center, then there's no limit. But if you have taken a loan from the center, then you will have to borrow according to the center. And every year, the center will set certain limits. Limits to borrowings are set by the center every year, how much they can borrow, because every state government has taken a loan from the center. Plus, they have imposed fiscal deficit on themselves because of various fiscal responsibility legislation passed by the state governments. Just like you have FRBM at the center, you have fiscal responsibility legislation passed by the state governments. Every state government has its own discipline, fiscal discipline legislation. FRBM is for the center. Do we have any rules for FRBM on fiscal deficit of center? Act does not specify, one more thing, Act does not specify any of the targets. The targets are specified by certain rules. For example, reducing it to 3%, reducing it to revenue deficit, how much? Is it 0? 2012 it was changed. Effective revenue deficit has to be 0, revenue deficit can be 2%. Effective revenue deficit introduced through an amendment in 2012. So they said, usko 0 karna hai, that grants will be given. So grants will be given, so we can give certain money. And anyways, these targets can be changed by the government because these targets are part of the rules given by the Act. It is mentioned not in the Act. The Act only mentions we need a fiscal discipline and there needs to be certain documents which have to be presented along the budget. There are 4 documents which have to be presented. The rules mention the targets, and this is something which the government has kept on postponing, or also they have amended the rules what they have to achieve. Same thing on the state level is fiscal responsibility legislation. This is a constitutional mandate which the states have to follow. If you're following the present case, what is happening, center versus Kerala. 2 days back the center said, if Kerala withdraws the suit filed in the Supreme Court, we are ready to give the money, extra money or extra limit. So from where is the limit coming? Article 293. This is about the fiscal discipline, the limit set. Borrowing. How much borrowing? Borrowing is deficit. How much you can borrow from the market. This is where the states complain. If you are limiting the borrowings to us, we will sacrifice the capital expenditure. We will not be able to create growth. Revenue expenditure has most of the heads as committed expenditure. That is interest payments, pensions and salaries. The scope of reduction there is slightly less. Capital will be reduced if you impose a limit. Now what are the aggregate receipts? Again the trends in this. You have own revenue sources, the taxes by the state. What are the various taxes which the states can levy or the states get? Agriculture. Do we have tax on agriculture? Most of the states have exempt income from agriculture income. Plantation पे किस states ने लगाया है?
Tax on alcoholic liquor for human consumption.
Tax on?
Alcoholic liquor for human. Tax on
Maximum tax revenue source is what?
Alcoholic liquor, petrol and diesel.
It used to be VAT, that is sales tax. Now it is SGST. Then you have sales tax which the states levy as value added tax. On what all items? Petrol, diesel, aviation turbine fuel, anything else? Tobacco pe center can levy after GST. Tobacco is under GST, but center can levy after that also. Excise lagata center on tobacco. Natural gas. All these under this natural gas sales tax is the state levying. See, these are the things you need to revise. Trend जानने से पहले classification, you need to know what are the state's own tax revenue. Can the state levy excise duty? I'm just give you a broad overview. Can the state levy excise duty? Yes, on what? Excise duty, if you see the constitutional distribution, excise was the responsibility of center, manufacturing, and sale was the responsibility of state. They have combined these two when they have introduced GST. But there are some goods still outside GST, and the state has power of taxation on manufacturing, that is on alcohol and few other related goods. That is, the state can levy excise duty. Plus, you have land transactions, stamp duty, registration fees. You have taxes on, yes, professional entertainment tax. Then you have one more. These are some of your taxes which are state's own sources for revenue generation. The trends in the state own tax revenue, what exactly the improvements have been? 6.4 to 6.1 reduced, 6.1 to 5.9 again reduced. This is one of the biggest problems in India, that the state's own tax revenue has not been very high. 5.9, 6.3, 6, and then 7. So there's no consistency which you can see either increasing or decreasing. This is what you have to do in each and every slide. Note down what the consistency you observe in pattern. Because performance is going to be asked, you can't remember the data, but you can observe what the pattern is. In the exam, it is easier to do if you know certain anomalies. But here, if I'm giving you the data, this becomes easy. The question you can solve. Now similarly, state has non-tax revenue sources also. All of the trends I've given in the own tax revenue. Own tax revenue have stamp and registration fees, sales tax, excise, SGST, and other type of tax we just discussed. Provisional accounts, वो final number जो last year covered there. Actual, yes. This is something which you can forget. You just go with the budget estimates. Revise भी नहीं देखना, budget estimates से you just see what exactly is happening. Even if you go with the actual, वो line में ही होगा, ज़्यादा दूर नहीं होगा. Idea is trend observe करना है. Trend में कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा change नहीं होगा. Either it will increase or decrease. The own tax revenue, the growth, the same thing drawn in a graph. The components of the tax, own tax revenue of states. This shows which tax is the maximum. You can observe here that the sales tax or VAT used to be the maximum till the GST year. Since the introduction of GST, it is the SGST which is the maximum. So you can have a question on this also. Out of the 4 tax revenue sources, which is the highest for the states? So this document is very important to give you trends based on both things. What exactly is happening, and first you need to know the classification also. What are the taxation sources? Taxation sources in terms of all of this we discussed. Stamp duty, excise for alcohol and related products, drugs and toiletries pe bhi they excise they can levy. Tax on vehicles, sales tax, goods and services, other indirect taxes, professional and all. Now what are the components of own tax, non-tax revenue? Non-tax revenue. From where can the state get non-tax revenue? One is interest payments. Fees on what? There are 3 different components for getting fees. One is economic services. These are services which the state sells. For example, what type of services the state government is selling? Economic services says it is collecting user fees for provision of certain goods and services. Then there are certain types of social services. What are social services? Drinking water, sanitation, education, health. All of those are classified under social services, where also you are taking user fees but not at the right cost. What could be economic services where they are charging the right cost? Electricity. Some states are directly distributing electricity, they are not doing it to DISCOM. जो DISCOM से दे रहे हैं उनका पैसा DISCOM से ही आएगा. Then DISCOM will give them what? Any profit or dividend. DISCOM एक PSU है state का. That will give profit or this. If any state is directly distributing electricity, they will give. For example, one state is directly producing electricity, not through a DISCOM, and they get the maximum money from that only. बिहार में मिल रही electricity. इलेक्ट्रिसिटी मिल रही होती तो इतनी पार्टी नहीं बदलनी पड़ती. Goa. What else? What all economic services? Transportation services. Is it directly or through PSU? Or there's one significant service जिससे maximum revenue है most of the states का, especially the eastern states. Toll is also there. Mining license and mining royalty. Licenses for mining and royalty on various minerals. This is the maximum source. Apart from that, power, industry, even services such as forestry and wildlife. All of these I've given in the PPT. You will get it from the information from here. See, classification-based questions, most have been exhausted till 2015-16. Now, mostly questions have moved away from classification, but still, state-specific data has not been asked. So you should know the state revenue sources, both tax and non-tax. So you should have a clear-cut idea what are the tax sources and from where the maximum comes. It is the state GST, but the state is still levying VAT on various items which are not part of GST, is still levying excise duty which is not part of GST. These are your revenue from economic sources. Industries, mostly mining, petroleum, power, major and medium irrigation, and forestry and wildlife. ये जो direct user service and goods provide करके state is earning money. These are your economic services which the state is providing without a subsidy. When it is providing it for welfare, those are social services. So these are your non-tax revenue sources. Maximum comes from industries. What is included under industries is not the profit or dividend of state industry. It is the services which are provided to industries. For example, you might have provided land on rent. There could be land monetization done by the state government. They might have provided land on rent to the industry for certain work. They might earn rent there. This is the non-tax revenue. So user goods and services without a subsidy, that would be mostly economic. And those which are provided for the welfare of the people, these are your social services. What are the social services? Education, sports, art and culture. Medical and public health. Urban development, water supply, sanitation, and also miscellaneous service, for example, garbage collection. All of these are services given by the state government but not charged at the right price. Economic service may also they can give a subsidy, but mostly they are charged at the commercial price. This is where they are providing state. This is why this classification is important, because this is slightly different from the services which the center provides. Center list and state lists are different. This is why these non-tax revenue sources are important. A very interesting connotation things from here, what the states have done, mostly they have tried to improve their administration.
Sir, shouldn't IGST be also there in tax?
IGST also. See, IGST what we say is goes to the center. So जो state का part है comes to the state, that is SGST only. This is why IGST is not mentioned. वो SGST का component will come to the state itself. So IGST has two components, center and state. So that goes to the center, center state को उसका पैसा दे देगा.
Sir, can one state borrow from another state?
Can, but every state is indebted. At the end of the day, see, why do we have finance commission? Why do we have finance commission? Because most of the taxation heads are given to the center, but revenue used is with the state. Collection is with the center. Now every state will have certain developmental things to do, whether giving a revenue subsidy or through capital. What is the benefit it is getting by giving a loan to someone else? It can give, this is why we had discussed gross fiscal deficit and net fiscal deficit. But reality would be very different. No state will be ready to give. वो वही पैसा अपने लोगों को क्यों नहीं देगा? This has more political benefits as compared to giving it to other states. Why will some state from its own tax revenue or borrowing provide it to another state? State efforts, few things here. Can the states levy cess? Can the states levy? Whatever the taxation heads they have, they can levy both of these things. Clearly said by the Supreme Court, states are sovereign because they get power from the Constitution. So whatever taxation powers they have from the Constitution, they can levy a cess on it. Number of states have started levying cess. For example, the Kerala government, and see what is important to understand here. There have been number of indirect taxes which have been subsumed under GST, and there are taxes which the states still have the power. The taxes where the states still have the power, on this they can levy cess. If they want to levy cess on GST, then they will have to take permission of GST Council. For example, it allowed 2019 Kerala natural calamity cess 1% after permission from GST Council. So if they want to levy cess on this, they will have to take a permission, but their own heads they can levy a cess. For example, Kerala's social security cess is on fuel and alcohol. Both of them taxes are on with the state government. Sale of fuel, because fuel ka manufacturing, that is fuel ka excise, is with center. But liquor ka manufacturing is with state. So uspe they can levy a cess. So the heads which they have for taxation, which are left after GST, they can levy a cess on that. And how is cess different from a tax? It's a tax on tax. Anything else? Yes, this is always done for a particular purpose. The money has to be used for that purpose. For example, providing social security. Goa's green cess on vehicles. Again, jo unke paas taxation head hai, on that only they can levy a cess. Himachal Pradesh water and milk cess. What would be water and milk cess? This is very interesting. They have done. A water, there is no taxation on water. Packaged drinking water hoga to GST hai. Right? So what is water cess? Not Punjab. Electricity generation. Mostly going to Punjab, they will have to pay a tax. So electricity is a tax power to the state. So hydropower electricity generation, there is a cess. Mostly if you read the newspaper, in the last few months, Punjab is complaining because electricity given from Himachal to Punjab is carrying a cess. What is milk cess? It's a very interesting concept they have done. ये सेस लगाया इन्होंने लिकर पे है, पर यूज करेंगे मिल्क सेक्टर को इंप्रूव करने के लिए. So what they have done is they have named it milk cess for the improvement of dairy and poultry. The money will be used, but it is on manufacturing of liquor. The idea to be taken from this document, especially this data, is that the state can levy cesses on the taxation head which the state has. If it wants to levy a cess on this, they will have to take a permission from GST Council. Is the idea clear? We'll come to center cess also. Center, what cess they are collecting and what exactly is the idea. The expenditure pattern of the center of the, again following the same thing, you have to go with the trends. Decrease, increase, further decrease. The trends are important. You need to note down each and every trend, what exactly is happening. The biggest problem was this, that revenue expenditure was not being able to, they were not being able to reduce 14.9, 14.2, 14.8, 13.5, 14.4 still again. So this is something which they're not able to push down. What they're doing is they're pushing the capital expenditure. 2.6, 2.3, 2.3 and 2.4. Significantly putting the capital expenditure to do revenue. Then has increased 2.5, 3.2, but still very less as compared to what revenue is. Same patterns. What exactly is social sector expenditure? All of this data can be used in prelims also. The amount of money spent on social expenditures and what the committed expenditures are. RBI has raised this point of concern that committed expenditures will increase if you have pensions shifting from NPS to OPS. The committed expenditure of the state governments will increase. The outstanding liabilities of the state government, debt to GDP ratio is somewhere around 30%. 28-29% is the idea. Center, how much center has debt to GDP? 80 to 83 is the total. There's somewhere around 57 to 60%. Then there's the idea of debt service ratio. Whenever we try to talk about debt to GDP ratio, what is the problem of debt to GDP? What is the problem of having a high debt to GDP? And how do we know whether the debt to GDP is high or not, sustainable or not? The biggest sustainability factor is the debt service ratio. What is the debt service ratio? Debt service ratio is how much interest you have to pay as a percentage of what revenue you earn. This is what they're trying to explain what the debt service ratio is. How much interest you have as percentage of revenue. If this figure goes high, that means your sustainability is poor. If you have high debt service ratio, that means the interest which you are paying is significantly high, you don't have revenue sources. Another problem with having high debt to GDP ratio is that the high debt will lead to crowding out. If you borrow more, there will be less amount of money available for private sector, and also the money which will be available for private sector will come at a higher cost. So the two problems of debt to GDP ratio is that your committed expenditure will increase, the debt sustainability will worsen, and you are going to have crowding out. This we have seen from the previous slide also, that most of the debt the states are taking, they are taking for revenue expenditure, they're not spending money on capital, because this servicing ratio becomes better if capital expenditure is done, because capital expenditure helps you build assets. Assets is one which can help you generate income. Income is the one which is going to help you pay this interest. Because the moment you create asset, both from the household and the firm side, you have more revenue generation capacity. More revenue generation capacity gives you the income to solve this interest. So ye variable badega, ye kam hoga. Your debt service ratio becomes better. Is the idea clear? The trend and the classification, the definition of debt service ratio. Both are tax on tax.
जो सेस है, सेस is a tax, सेस is for specific purpose.
Cess is for specific purpose, has to be utilized for that purpose only. Now what are the debts? How exactly the state government is taking debt? The total debt, first the classification. They take money from market loans. They issue security from NSSF. This point I'll make clear here itself. Now whatever the money that goes into NSSF, this is part of public account. What exactly is the idea of NSSF? From where does the money come in? National Small Savings Fund. This is coming from the various small saving schemes run by the government, right? Now, ideally, the borrowing which the government does, which is called as the public debt, it happens on Consolidated Fund of India. Now, some part they can do on NSSF also. For example, the center government can issue securities to NSSF and take the money. These are called as the special securities to NSSF. I'll explain we'll discuss in the next part, the public debt of India. So the center is issuing securities to NSSF and taking the money. Therefore, this security becomes part of the total public debt. Now, there's a difference between the total government debt and the public debt. The government debt includes both the public debt and the debt on public account. Because NSSF mein jitna paisa aaya hai, this is the liability of the center government only. But this is part of total government debt and not a public debt. Public debt का वही part होगा which the center government has taken from NSSF by issuing securities. Is the idea clear? Wait, I'll explain again. You have the National Small Savings Fund and you have the government borrowing from the market. Right? Now, if the government takes money from NSSF by issuing securities, they will issue securities to them. These securities, along with market borrowings, are part of public debt. But the money which is totally kept in NSSF, that total money is also the liability of the government. NSSF have two things now. NSSF is one, investing the money, investing in securities. Plus NSSF has liabilities also. What is the liability of NSSF? The money which they collected from the small saving schemes. This liability is liability of whom? So the investment minus the liability becomes the liability of center. These two together are total government debt. The government borrowed from the market and borrowed from the securities issued to NSSF. These two are part of public debt. But total liabilities on NSSF are part of total government debt. Is the idea clear? NSSF had 1000 crore rupees. 1000 crore में से 200 crore का it has bought securities from the government. So what is the total liability that is left on this? So 800 is part of total government debt, and this 200 is part of public debt. A small classification change. ये तो total है ही government को liability देनी है public account पे. But when we count public debt, we do not count the liability on public account. Public debt is the liability which has been taken on consolidated fund. Now when I have to take a liability on consolidated fund, I can take money from market or I can issue securities. I'll tell you there are other securities also issued, sovereign gold bonds and number of other securities also. Is this idea clear? Now can the state governments also issue securities to NSSF? Why? उनके पास पैसा है, वो इन्वेस्ट जब सेंटर गवर्नमेंट की सिक्योरिटी में कर रहे हैं वो यहां भी कर सकते हैं. When they have 1000 crore rupees, they can use this money to invest in state government securities also. This is the special securities issued to NSSF. But this component has reduced drastically because the 14th Finance Commission said if the state takes money from NSSF, that comes at a very high interest cost. So barring 3 states, all states have stopped issuing the securities to NSSF. Delhi, Andhra Pradesh and one more. Delhi, Kerala और Arunachal Pradesh. एक बार check करना रजत. Which states are borrowing money from NSSF? Barring 3 or 4 states, no one is now issuing, but they can issue securities to NSSF. Is this idea clear? So now components of state debt is market loans, issuing security. The state government can issue security. What are the securities of the state government called? They are called as state development loans. This is one. Second, they can issue securities to NSSF. You can see how they have drastically fallen. Because the Finance Commission told them that the interest on these securities is very high. So now they have stopped borrowing. It's like drastic reduce. They can take loans from banks and financial institutions. Only 4 states, Arunachal, Kerala, Delhi and Madhya Pradesh. These are the 4 states which are issuing these securities. Loans from banks, loans and advances from the center, public account which the state has. This means state PF. State employees ka PF is going, which is a liability on them. They have certain reserve funds and deposit and advances. All of this is part of the total liabilities of the state. Classification you should know, you will then have an idea of reduction or increase. Is the classification clear? Primarily the state borrows from market sources. This is where the limit is applied by center, that is article. Classification and trend. See, the more in depth we go of this classification becomes important, trend becomes less important. Trend important tha fiscal deficit ka, expenditure ka or revenue, what they are doing. Here, this classification or the trend is slightly less probable. Probable more is what are the sources from where the states borrow. You should be clear that they also can borrow from NSSF. They are not doing after the recommendation of Finance Commission. This is an important source which mostly we don't revise. कि NSSF से भी पैसे state लेता है. Is the idea clear? Vertical tax devolution. Now why this trend is coming up? Vertical tax devolution, when the 13th Finance Commission said how much? 32. If this said 32, they said 42 and this is 41, then why is it decreasing significantly? Why is this decreasing significantly? This is highly talked about, and this is the terms of reference of 16th also. Not exactly the terms of reference, but this is something they have to deal with. Center collects all tax, most of the taxes. That has to be distributed between center and state. This is what Finance Commission is doing. The problem is, center is not collecting most of the money as tax, center is mostly collecting money as, जिसकी वजह से ये circle नहीं बड़ा हो रहा है. So if this circle is not increasing with GDP, this circle is increasing every year. That means this percentage though is stuck at 41, but the circle itself is not increasing. 41 कैसे increase होगा? Now the 16th Finance Commission has to talk about whether the cess and surcharge should also be shared with the state or not. Now, why is the center not sharing cess and surcharge with the state? From where is this provision coming in? Constitution. Is it in the Constitution? See, these are the things which you need to know. सबको पता है cess नहीं जाता, but किसने बोला है?
Sir, provision I don't know, but center is saying that because they are coming up with the centrally sponsored schemes, that's why.
Article 271. Center कुछ भी बोले, 271 clearly says tax will be shared. In bracket they mention clearly cess and surcharge will not. They mention 4 terms which will not go to the total divisible pool. The maximum money comes from cess and surcharge. So it's a constitutional provision which says that cess and surcharge will not be shared with the states. And if the state center collects more tax in the form of this and not this, so they are not increasing the circle where the state can get the money. This is the money they are collecting. This is a very important topic. CAG in 2019-20 did a special report on how much the cess and surcharge are being collected by center. Now, what are the all cess collected? There are a number of cess collected by center. Revenue collection of union government from cesses. You can see how it is increasing. How in the previous few years the cess revenue has increased significantly. Though it has decreased from 19.17, but this is very high. As compared to this is a significant figure. That means total divisible pool is not increasing. Cess itself is increasing very high. See this, why this data is important. You can have a statement in the paper that says that the revenue from cess has consistently increased in the previous few years. This decline will show that the statement is not correct. All of these slides which I've shown show certain trend. You need to know the trend because the difficulty level of the question can come from this. So just there are 10 or 15 trends only. Broadly, if we just go through the graphs, that will not be difficult to remember. These are your major cesses which the center collects. Health and education, cess on crude oil, road and infrastructure, GST compensation, agriculture, infrastructure and development cess. Any new additions that happen, you need to cover from your budget. What are the others? Others are 2, social welfare surcharge and universal service obligation. Universal service obligation they charge from the telecom companies. So you should have an idea about the cess being collected. This cess has certain different purpose. What is the purpose of this? This is to pay the compensation. But compensation ended in 2022. Then why they are collecting? Are the states being paid compensation after 22? They are not being paid any compensation. Compensation ka promise sirf 5 years ka tha. 17 to 22 on a base of 16, we are going to give you 14% growth. You did not get the growth, you are going to get compensation. After 22, the compensation cess is being collected because during the COVID years, the cess collection was low. To give the compensation, the government had to borrow. To pay this borrowing, the government is now collecting cess. After 22, the cess has been extended for 5 more years to pay for the borrowings which were done to pay the compensation. So now the compensation is not there, but cess has been extended to 5 more years to pay for the borrowings which were done to pay the compensation. These are small facts which you should have an idea. Compensation cess was for compensation, but that ended in 22. But during the 2 pandemic years, there was significant money taken because cess was not there. Why the cess was not there? Activities. What are the activities? You should have an idea. They are mostly on luxury items. 28% wali items pe you have the GST compensation cess. That goes specifically to the center to pay the state. Now they are not paying to the state, they are fulfilling the borrowings for this compensation. So all of these cess, you should have an idea of whether it is levied or not. You can very well have a question, the center levies cess for these purposes. Is the idea clear? Iska trend is not important. What is important is what the cess are. So 2 things I told you, this whole report is important for understanding classifications and in some areas performance. नहीं करना ही नहीं है, जरूरी नहीं. Clearly 271 says that will not go to the divisible pool.
सर तो फिर जो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट है तो वो अपना सेस लगा सकते हैं, जैसे काउ सेस, मिल्क सेस लगाया है.
Only on those items where they have taxation powers. On GST items they cannot. GST items needs permission from GST Council.
Okay, sir.
Wait for horizontal devolution. This is something was asked in the previous year, 2023. What are the parameters on which they were distributing? See, this is a very important thing both for prelims and mains. Mains also they have asked a question, what are the recommendations and what are the problems? There are 4 principles which any finance commission will tackle. This is mostly this parameters for mains: need, fiscal disability, equity and efficiency. 15th Finance Commission does not provide money for infrastructure. 10th Finance Commission used to give money कि जिनके पास infrastructure कम है उनको infrastructure के लिए they will also give money. So this is the formula for vertical devolution, where you have population. Population was on what basis? यही तो controversy थी 71 to 2011, and this is why they added area is always covered, forest covered since 13th Finance Commission. Income distance. What do you mean by income distance? What is income distance? So you will arrange all the states in per capita income. The top ones will not get it, below ones will get more. So income distance, this means income distance from the top. Income distance from the top ranking state. All of the states are ranked in per capita income. Those who are at the top will get less. जितना distance बढ़ता जाएगा उतने पैसे बढ़ जाएंगे. And this has, you can see the weightage. This is a very important indicator. And this ensures that poor economies, the states get more money. This is a problem because now the southern states are saying, we don't have a problem in giving money. We have a problem, what are they doing with the money? Why is it funny? Tax effort and fiscal discipline. Fiscal discipline they have removed, it's 2.5 tax effort only. Grants from the center and composition. What all grants the state is giving to the center? Center is giving to the state. Again, classification. Performance important नहीं है. What are those statutory and discretionary? सबसे ज़्यादा पैसा center states को किस grant में देता है? How? What is statutory grant? ये तो you have learned the constitution. Article? What type of a grant? The maximum money comes from centrally sponsored schemes. What is the idea of centrally sponsored schemes? Done on state subjects to perform or to achieve uniformity. The center and states will share money. And this is conditional grant. If you perform certain conditions, then only the money comes to the state. Then you have Finance Commission grants also. This is also important. On what grounds did Finance Commission give money? The Finance Commission money came in the form of these grants. There are certain state-specific, disaster management, revenue deficit, sector-specific and local government transfers. All of these heads are important. Previous year they asked, what are the parameters for distribution? This year they can have a question on, grants. They had already in 2015 asked whether 14th Finance Commission recommended these grants or not. So one type of grants are coming from Finance Commission, the other money is coming from center under the centrally sponsored schemes. These are all of your tax measures. You can use them in your mains answer. This is mostly less probable in prelims. Just go through them. You can use it in the mains answer. Is the idea clear how you to cover this document? What all things you have to observe? The parameters and this. Again, tax revenue and also non-tax revenue, what the states have done. Is the idea clear? Any doubts from the document? We'll take a break of 10 minutes and then reconvene with public debt. Is that report clear? State government data and how you have to use it. Similar is every year the center government presents a report on its public debt. Number of questions have come from this report also. In fact, what they mention or what they discuss in that report has also been picked because they talk about a lot of multilateral and bilateral institutions. Rapid Finance Facility, Credit Facility, the G20 Common Framework for Debt. All of those questions came from these reports itself. Public debt ki report mein hi they have discussed all of these concepts. We'll discuss whatever they have mentioned in the report, same classification, performance, and any special boxes. The first is what exactly is the public debt. The same thing NSSF wala I'll again show. The public debt of the central government is the one which they contract on the Consolidated Fund of India, Article 292. Now what exactly are the components of this debt? One part of the debt is taken from internal sources and the other is taken from external sources. Broader classification I'll tell you here. Each and every instrument we'll discuss through the PPT. Now the internal debt which the government takes is of two forms. They are marketable securities and non-marketable securities. One of the components here under non-marketable securities is sovereign gold bond. Sovereign gold bond is tradable, but its tradability is less. This is why it's mentioned here. Otherwise, sovereign gold bond tradable hai. The tradability is less. There are a number of issues in tradability. This is why it's mentioned as part of non-marketable trade. It is marketable in nature. In the non-marketable, one security which we have is the securities issued to NSSF. This is the component I explained to you. External components, from where does the government borrow money? External debt. There are two sources of external debt. One is the external assistance window, where the government takes money from multilateral bodies, multilateral development banks, or they take it from bilateral sources. What are the multilateral sources? What agencies of World Bank? Is IBRD, IDA. Market rates, concessional rates. Asian Development Bank, concessional again is International Fund Financing Agriculture Development. International Fund for Agriculture Development number. I'll show you the complete criteria also, just giving you a broad overview here. Bilateral sources taking from countries, maximum debt comes from Japan, Germany, and these are the three countries which give the maximum debt to India. Then there is other government debt. Other government debt includes majorly two sources. One is the SDR allocation that has come from IMF. Now this is an important thing. Is India borrowing money from IMF? What does the IMF do? So you see, the purpose of IMF is to solve the balance of payment problems. Do we have a balance of payment problem? India is not borrowing from IMF. The SDR allocation that the IMF does, only for accounting purpose they are shown in debt. These are not debt actually. This is a cost-free allocation. That means the government does not have to pay any money, and this is not a debt. Classification purposes only we have mentioned it here. This is not a debt. There's no money which you have to pay for getting the SDR or also returning the SDR. It is not a debt. Only for classification purposes, IMF SDR allocation is mentioned in other government debt. The other government debt is the foreign institutional investment saving money in government security. Since these are foreign institutional investors coming from outside, this is part of external debt. One more small component, the defense debt, taken money from outside for specially defense purposes. In fact, how we mention this defense debt is specially classification hai. There is a rupee debt which we have to pay to Russia because we had taken money from the erstwhile USSR. One component was to pay for civilian and the other was for defense. Otherwise also the government classifies defense debt separately, the money which is being used for defense expenditures. This is the broader idea of public debt of the government, which they take on Consolidated Fund of India. Now this is not the total liability. This along with the liability on public account, this is the total central government debt. Public debt plus the public account. What could be the liability on public account? This is a liability. And what liability will be counted here? The investments which have been done in government security minus this is the total debt the government has to pay. Plus the center government employees are putting money in provident fund. Similar types of funds become the total public account liability. This plus this is total center government debt. Center government debt or center government liabilities. This is the broader classification. What is marketable and non-marketable, I'll explain in detail each and every instrument. You have to follow the trends. This is the debt profile of the government. See, this external debt is only one component of the total external debt. Total external debt means all the institutions taking money from outside. One institution is government. So this external debt is also called as sovereign external debt. जो total external debt है इंडिया का, that has two components. One is sovereign and the other is the non-sovereign part. This part is what we are talking about here. Is the idea clear? How foreign institutional investment in government securities are an external debt. Government of India at any point of time will borrow using a government security, those securities. If outside investors invest, that is external debt. And they're allowed in all types of securities. They're allowed in T-bills, they're allowed in the dated securities, they're also allowed in state development loans. There are 3 windows for doing this, that also we'll discuss. Is the broader classification clear? Now what exactly are marketable and non-marketable securities? Just watch the trends, I'll explain the classification. Now marketable securities, difference between dated and treasury is clear. Dated is for, dated securities are for 1 year plus. Treasury bills are for up to 1 year, 3 time periods, 91, 182 and 364. What are cash management bills? They're same as treasury bills, issued only for 91 days. Is the idea clear? So you have 3 types of marketable securities, dated and treasury and also cash management. 14-day intermediate treasury bills. What are these? Whenever the state governments have certain cash, positive cash inflow or cash is less, whenever there is a cash positive surplus for a small period of times, they put money in this 14-day intermediate T-bills. These are issued only for state governments or foreign banks. This is not issued for anyone else. Issued to state to manage their balances. Issue center ही करता है. Issued to state. So what the state does, whenever for short period of time it has more cash in hand, they will put money in this security. और जैसे ही cash कम होता है ये security they are going to redeem from the government. 14-day है. Is the idea clear? No. Call money is interbank borrowing. This is a security, bond. I am telling the feature of the bond. यहाँ पे कोई concept नहीं है, बनाया है और ये feature है. Compensation and other bonds. The government sometimes can take money from, pay compensation to anything, for example, subsidies. When the government is paying subsidies, for example, to FCI or to oil marketing companies, they can issue bonds to them. For example, I don't have money to pay to FCI, I have to pay them the subsidy amount for food. I issue them a bond. Similarly, oil marketing companies, the oil bonds were issued before 2014 when the prices were being administered by the government. For example, oil marketing companies ka price aaya 40 rupees. I asked them to sell at 35. So this 5 rupees per liter will come from where? Come from government. If government does not have money, government will issue them bonds. Securities issued to international financial institution. The same concept. Certain financial institutions, we did not have the money to pay to them, which we have to pay as contribution. For example, there was membership of any particular body where we had to pay a contribution amount. We did not have the money for contribution, we paid them certain securities. What are the features of this security? This security is non-marketable and also has no interest. So there is one non-marketable securities issued for states, one for compensation and other. Securities issued to international financial institutions, securities against small savings. This is the securities to NSSF, the component which we discussed. NSSF has money, you can issue them securities and take the money from them. This is securities against small savings. Post office life insurance, what the money has been received by small savings, for example, small savings has 3 components. Post office deposits, you have social welfare schemes and national saving certificates, farmer Kisan Vikas Patra and Mahila Saman certificate. These are the 3 schemes. But this post office is also having certain money from other financial functions, for example, insurance. If I have to use this money which they got from insurance, that I can take by issuing securities against post office life insurance. जो deposit का पैसा है वो तो NSSF में जाएगा. But if they're doing other services also, for example, selling insurance, they have a lot of money here. They have collected a lot of premium. That money I can take from them by issuing securities. This is the special securities against post office life insurance fund. Is the idea clear how the center government is taking money from various institutions by issuing them non-marketable security? Special securities issued to various institutions, the developmental banks, taking money from them. LIC, Exim Bank, all of these, NABARD and all. That also can be done by the government. In fact, compensation and other bonds, they have another component where they take money from sovereign gold bonds. Marketability is less. This is why it is mentioned under non-marketable. Is the idea clear? What are the components of non-marketable securities? How the center government can take money if it is not market. All of them have special purposes. How they are taking money. Post office can issue number of services. It is taking deposits, 1 year, 3 year, recurring and all. It can also sell insurance services. Insurance fund बनाया हुआ है, where it is selling insurance and capturing significant amount of premium. I can use this money. In fact, what I am not using, this insurance fund is using the money on getting an interest from the government. For example, certain insurance agencies or even pension agencies, pension firms, they have a significant corpus of money. People pay premium to them, people pay certain amount to pension firms. Now, how do they earn interest on that money? अगर इन फर्म्स को पैसा कमाना है, पैसा whatever premium they've collected, they want to invest in some places. They can invest in government securities. तो पोस्ट ऑफिस जो अपना इंश्योरेंस वाला पैसा इनमें डाल रहा है वो स्पेशल सिक्योरिटीज है. Is the idea clear? Apart from market, center government can take money here. State ने सिर्फ एक ही जगह से पैसे लिए थे, that was small savings. They had either marketable debt, that was state development loans, or they had this. Center has number of sources. Is the idea clear? What are the different securities issued by the government? All of them are covered under non-marketable securities. Then, so this component, that is internal debt plus external debt, this is the total public debt. Then you have public account liabilities, NSSF, Provident Fund, Reserve Fund, all of them. This plus this becomes the total government debt. The same thing, internal plus external is public, public plus public account. This becomes the total central government debt. Is the idea clear? This is the trend in public debt, marketable mostly, small part non, and this is the total debt. total public debt of the country. 42, 53, and now 51. Observe the trend. The first one was to know the classification. This is the trend. As a percentage of gross liabilities, ज़्यादा कौन से हैं? If we compare this 100% as the total debt, which component has us most? This was with percentage of GDP. This is within the government debt. What are the percentages? If we want to rank the debt in terms of which is the highest, this is the slide. Maturity period of outstanding central government liabilities, what we have seen is in some of the years they can ask a random statement also that the government has mostly long-term maturity or short-term maturity. So maximum we have, if we see 2022, it is 5 to 10 years or 15 years. Longer maturity ज़्यादा है. Shorter maturity is less as percentage of total. The whole across a period of. Ownership pattern of government dated securities. Who are the owners? Who hold the maximum government securities? Why banks? The statutory liquidity ratio. They have to fulfill SLR. They have to keep money in SLR in the form of cash, gold or security. Cash and gold does not earn them interest. Security earns them interest. Therefore, maximum government debt is held by commercial banks. Then you also have insurance companies. Insurance companies are sitting on a very huge chunk of money. Not everyone has the risk materializing that they will pay the claim. So insurance agency is also significant. Then you also have RBI having significant government securities. Open market operations, also RBI holding securities because of the money creation. RBI. This is the broader idea. Then this is the foreign portfolio investors. There are 3 platforms for doing it. Foreign institutional investors, they can also invest in government securities. There are 3 platforms for doing it. In 2015-16, the first platform that was introduced was the medium-term framework. Now, what is the idea of medium-term framework? How much money foreign institutional investors can invest in dated securities and can invest in state development loans. The limit is specified every year by the RBI. Under the medium-term framework, the limit of investments in dated securities and state government securities, for some years it has been fixed to 6% and 2%, has how much they can do is specified under medium-term framework. Last year, 2020-21, they introduced another window called the fully accessible route. The fully accessible route says there are certain specified securities in which there is no limit. This window is fully accessible. So there will be the serial number of all securities. In these securities, you can invest any amount of money. There's no limit. This window is called as fully accessible route. In the last few years, the increase in government security coming from foreign institutional investment is because of this. And in 2020, the introduction of voluntary retention route. So foreign institutional investment coming in government securities comes from 3 routes. Voluntary retention route mein, what is the limit is specified by the government, but the benefit here is if you voluntarily say that you are going to retain your investment, there are certain benefits which you're going to get in terms of regulation. If you voluntarily retain your investment कि हम 6 महीने साल तक पैसे रखेंगे, the whole idea of foreign institutional investment is that it can anytime move out of the country. It's highly volatile. So if you retain your investments for some period of time, we are going to provide you benefits in terms of regulatory requirements. We're going to relax the regulatory requirements for these type of securities. So 3 routes for investment. Medium-term framework will always define the limit. Fully accessible route without limit, specified securities, and voluntary retention route. Retain the money, get benefits. These are the 3 routes for foreign institutional investment in government securities. Is the idea clear? Predictable regime of investment, medium-term framework, the FPI in state, central government securities and state development loans in 2015, investment limits were specified. So limits specified, medium term framework. Voluntary retention route, undertake investments. FPIs have been given greater operational flexibility in terms of investment decisions, exemptions from regulatory requirements, provided they retain the amount. Aggregate investment limit is this. Limit hai yahan pe, free nahi hai. And the fully accessible route, opened fully for non-resident investors without any restrictions, but specified securities. These are the three routes under which you can invest. This is the whole explanation we just discussed: public debt, consolidated fund, internal debt, marketable securities, fixed and floating dated, treasury bills, non-marketable internal issued to NSSF, international financial institutions, 14-day intermediate treasury bills, special securities, securitization of balance against postal insurance, the POLF, compensation and other bonds including sovereign gold bond, special securities issued to public sector. The explanation for all those things which we just discussed. The classification of public debt under marketable and non-marketable securities. This is again the same thing mentioned in terms of liabilities, how much they are. Public account liabilities are those which are credited to the public account of India. It includes the NSSF. NSSF includes the gap between total liabilities and investments of NSSF in the center government securities. The difference between investment and liabilities. State Provident Fund, share of accumulated Provident Fund contributions of central government employees. Other accounts, various other deposits which are being taken under public account. Another important component, what are extra budgetary liabilities? Yahi next topic hai the document. What are extra budgetary liabilities? Of budget borrowings. So what exactly happens here? The center government, whatever debt it is taking, it has to present in its budget. How is the center government presenting its debt in the budget? What is the variable in the budget which represents the debt burden of the government? Fiscal deficit. The borrowings which they do in 1 year, ये सारे compile होके ही debt बन रहा है. Now, there are certain limitations of the FRBM law that they have to control fiscal deficit. Plus also because of the globalized environment, countries will invest in your country only when you have macroeconomic stability. One factor of macroeconomic stability is controlling fiscal deficit. If you do not have a controlled fiscal deficit, people will not be willing to invest in your country. So there are global pressures also for fiscal discipline apart from the discipline from FRBM. See, FRBM is not a very effective law because FRBM does not have legal sanctions. FRBM does not have any legal sanctions. Also, the Act does not mention any targets. The targets are mentioned in rules which are amended very easily. Act is also amended easily, but that would require Parliament. Rules to government खुद ही change कर सकता है. So FRBM has loopholes because most of the targets are defined by rules. And if you do not follow the rules, there is absolutely no legal sanction. There is no one to check whether you are following the rules or not. And even if you don't, there is no punishment, no legal sanction. But due to global environment also, the government has to control fiscal deficit. Now, if the government has to control fiscal deficit, that means in a short period of time, revenue sources cannot be increased, but expenditure can be reduced. Now, how can the expenditure be reduced? The center has to pay money, say, to the Food Corporation of India for food subsidy. If the center has to pay money to them, I can ask them to borrow from the market and not take this money. If they don't take this money, expenditure reduced, fiscal deficit controlled. But this the Food Corporation which is taking from the market, iska pura liability is on the center. These are called as extra budgetary resources or off budget borrowing. So you have thwarted the fiscal disciplinary measures by doing this. CAG highlighted this in 2019-20, and since that year, the government in its budget is reporting if they are doing this or not. And they have now reduced this. In fact, they have brought another condition for states. From 1st January last year, center has to set the limits for the states to borrow. अब ये limit overpower करने के लिए, the state were asking their PSUs to borrow from the market. That means states were practicing off budget borrowing or extra budgetary borrowings. Now the center has said from last year, This limit will include this also. So you can't do this creativity. Improve this. You can't do this. This is off budget borrowings, and also state government center has also stopped doing it after 22. In fact, transparency भी दिखाई है, बता रहे हैं कितना किया है. This is included in budget. These are your extra budgetary resources or off budget borrowing which do not get reflected in your budget, and therefore you can effectively bypass this. Otherwise also FRBM is not a very strict law because there are no legal sanctions if you miss the targets. Plus the targets are mostly in rules, you can any day amend the rules. This is what is being happening. 2004 mein rules banaye that in the till 2007-8 you will reduce it. They kept on extending it. 2008 extended to 12, 12 said 16, 16 pandemic kept on extending. Now major change what the government has done, the rules which they are following are not strict targets. For example, reducing fiscal deficit to 3% or deficit to 0%, they are now following something called as a glide path. Glide path says कि reduce होगा, कितना होगा ये नहीं बता रहे, but हम glide करेंगे reduction पे. And this was one of the recommendations of N.K. Singh committee also. One of the members, Arvind Subramaniam, had said, fixed targets take away the flexibility of the government. Allow them to follow certain flexibility by accepting not targets but glide path. This is why you will find the mention of this term glide path in the budget. Is the idea of extra budgetary or off budget clear? The general government debt means everything. Center, state, union territories, everything. This is the liability position of state government we just discussed. Public debt mein market loan, loans from center and borrowings from NSSF, bonds from financial and banks. All of this is this. Power bonds, so the bonds given to discoms. Maturity profile of state the same. Very less short term. 0 to 1 year is not significant. Maximum is this. 1 to 5, 6 to 10. Maturity profile.
Sir, you just told that now the off-budgeting borrowing is being shown by the central government. So now are they part of the fiscal?
They are not part of the fiscal deficit. वो करना ये है, but they are still being transparent about it how we are taking from others. Transparency. तो ये budget में they are mentioning, this document is mentioning extra budgetary resources. If they have to mention in the fiscal deficit, why take this route? The good thing about the CAG report was that they were transparent about the quantum of what they are doing. So that if you want to have a clear picture of what the true fiscal deficit is, that you can know. But it is not part of fiscal deficit. Which way? No. वो limit वो change करनी थी, यही तो change फिर क्यों आया? If I have a limit on off budget borrowing itself, then तो I will do fiscal deficit only. अगर ऑफ बजट पे ही लिमिट है, so why not do the fiscal deficit limit?
सर तो फिर वो तो बहुत ज़्यादा भी कर सकते हैं ना फिजिकल डेफिसिट कम दिखाने के लिए.
लिमिट होती तो फिर तो यही ज़्यादा कर लेंगे ना. There is no limit. That is an exercise which you have done to bypass this. कोई चीज़ illegal या imprudent है, उस पे लिमिट क्यों लगाएंगे? If you are imposing a limit, that means you are sanctifying the whole process. कि जो कर रहे हो सही है.
Got it, sir. Thank you.
Fiscal deficit is part of center, paid by center.
Yes, fiscal deficit is center only. State का जो borrowing limits हो.
General budget fiscal deficit.
General budget fiscal deficit center.
Okay.
What we were discussing there was gross fiscal deficit and net fiscal deficit. The difference between the two is if the entity that is borrowing, if it is giving out loans, that will be subtracted to reach the net fiscal deficit. This is the profile of India, India's external debt to GDP, not just government debt. It is total external debt to GDP and the trend. Somewhere around 18 to 21%. This is the total external debt to GDP and this is the performance, the trend. No, government only. Center plus state. Where center is somewhere around 57, 58, state is around 28. So 85 के आसपास जो which is being highlighted in the newspapers that India is approaching 100% debt to GDP. That is only center plus state combined. 57 center and 28 state. So when we say center 57, it is both internal plus external. That is the idea. This is your trend with external debt to GDP. Short term is 20%, long term is 80%. This is India's short term external debt as a ratio of total. So one of the years, 2019, they had asked a question on this only. India's external debt is denominated in what? And India's external debt is long term or short term. So the trend first is India's external debt as debt to GDP ratio. This is short term external debt as a rate of total debt. Short term is 20%, roughly 18 to 20, maximum it is taken long. What is the difference of short term and long term? 1 year. 1 year is the classification criteria, short term is up to 1 year. This is the share 20 and 79.4, same, mentioning both. Ratio of foreign exchange reserves to external debt. How much reserves are covering what part of external debt? 92%. This shows the sustainability of external debt, that we have enough money not just to cover short term but almost long term also. The total debt ka coverage is 92.6% foreign exchange reserves. So roughly 600 billion covers 92% of the total debt. This shows the sustainability of the debt. Creditor wise, who takes the maximum loans? From outside. 35.5 they are commercial lenders. External commercial sources are the ones which are lending the most. Then you have bilateral and multilateral sources. The various sources, multilateral agencies, bilateral agencies, commercial lenders and NRI deposits. Another is trade credit. Export import, what they are taking is trade credit. So 5 classification: multilateral, bilateral, government, commercial lenders and NRI depositors along with trade credit. This is your currency composition. Maximum debt we are taken in US dollars. This was a statement asked in 2019. Maximum debt taken in US dollars. Second is Indian rupee. Second is Indian rupee, and this is cumulative. Entire country. We are not talking about only sovereign. India's external debt instrument wise, we take maximum in form of loans. Then we have deposits, trade credit and debt securities. Maximum is loan, it's not securities. Loans, deposits, trade credit. Deposits is the NRI deposits in Indian banks. The NRI deposits in Indian banks, there are 3 services available. This money is a liability of the bank. 3 bank accounts: non-resident external account, non-resident ordinary account and the foreign currency non-resident account. The difference: NRE account can be maintained in current savings or fixed deposit. It has to be maintained in rupees. Money is bought from outside then converted into rupees. Interest is tax free and you can take the interest plus the money anytime without any limits. This account is to be maintained in Indian rupees, has an interest and limits to repatriation, how much you can take back. FCNR is maintained in foreign currencies and it is only available as fixed deposit. This is interest free and there is no limit. Difference between the two is this account is to manage the income coming from outside. This is to manage the income coming from Indian sources. Income coming from outside, this is to manage income coming from Indian sources. These are the 3 accounts that are available and this is a significant liability on the external front. Deposits done by the NRI in the bank accounts in India. Maximum is loans and then you have trade credit and securities. Is the idea clear? Classification and performance both. This is mostly for classification. Are the accounts clear? External is all institutions' liability to rest of the world. All institutions' liabilities to rest of the world, not just government. This is what we are coming to. You have one part that is the sovereign debt, which the government owes. What is the government owing? This is what we discussed. External assistance. External assistance is multilateral and bilateral, and then you have other government debt comprising borrowings from defense debt component of rupee as well as investment of foreign institution invested in government securities. This is just we discussed. ये sovereign है. External debt of the government. Non-sovereign includes remaining components. Other institutions taking money from outside. This is the percentage, roughly 21% of the total debt. Total debt में government का debt is 21%. Composition of external debt, what exactly is the component? Maximum coming money from multilateral sources, less from bilateral. Yes, this information is slightly important. These are 4 windows which the world multilateral bodies created to help the countries suffering from too much debt. There were 4 major initiatives taken by the governments. One was under the G20 presidency, there was a debt service suspension initiative. These are the type of windows what they are asking in prelims. Now no longer are the external questions coming on report or indices. Indices still important, no longer the reports are being covered. What is being covered is various topics which are in news and any external or multilateral initiative taken on the same. For example, one of the problems in the last 2 to 3 years is that the global debt to GDP is rising significantly. Especially for low income, middle income countries, debt to GDP is rising significantly. And during the pandemic, the burden was very much high. So what facilities were created multilaterally to help? One of the facility was the debt service suspension initiative under the G20. There are certain features of this initiative that bilateral official creditors temporarily suspend the debt service payments from the most vulnerable countries. Now, what are the most vulnerable countries here? There are certain countries which use the poverty reduction and growth facility of IMF. Those countries which can get money from this are the ones which can get help from this. There are 73 odd countries which take money from the IMF's poverty reduction and growth facility. Those countries are eligible for debt service suspension initiative. Public debt this year, this report talks about these in various boxes. What are the various initiatives taken? It addresses 2 major points. One was SDR allocation that came extra from IMF. So they discussed the whole operations of SDR. And second, the debt suspension functions. One was the debt service suspension initiative. I'll give given the features also here. The second was common framework for debt treatment. This has been already asked in UPSC in 2020. They'd asked this Paris group and common framework introduced by G20. The common framework addressed debt vulnerabilities, timely and ordered debt treatment. This is an important one. Catastrophe containment and relief trust. Same during the pandemic. Multilateral trust. CCRT assistance available to countries if they are eligible to borrow from same IMF. Eligibility criteria is the same. Also qualify for relief if natural disaster has directly affected at least 1/3 of the population, destroyed more than quarter of the productive capacity, or caused damage to 100% of GDP. They are the ones which get money from catastrophe containment and relief trust. So you have common framework, the first suspension. Third is the catastrophe containment and relief trust provides grants for debt relief to low-income countries hit by catastrophic natural disaster or public health concerns. Is the idea clear? If you see the last year paper, multiple such facilities were asked. IMF's emerging financing through rapid credit and rapid financing. Same question in 2021. Rapid financing instrument and credit facility. Features of both. Another in September last year, 2022, IMF established a new temporary food shock window, helping countries get money for food. Food shock window under these two to provide for a period of 1 year a new channel for emergency fund due to acute food insecurity. So the question could be, this temporary food shock window has been introduced by which of the following organizations? So there are 4 initiatives: rapid credit, debt suspension, the catastrophe fund, and the food shock window under these two. ये already पूछ चुके हैं कि rapid credit and rapid finance was an initiative of which of the bodies? Is the idea clear? New SDR allocation was implemented. What is the idea of SDR allocation? Every country in 2020 was given extra SDR. What is the idea of SDR? So they've covered SDR in 2 boxes in the document. What is the idea of SDR? The whole problem was that to do trade, you did not have liquidity. So all of the members of IMF got certain SDR from IMF. So SDR is not a currency nor a debt. It is a potential claim. It is a reserve asset which is a potential claim to convert to foreign currency. So every country gets a certain SDR. They can use this SDR for exchanging it on currency. From where is the value of SDR coming? अब A को SDR मिले हैं, A के पास ट्रेड के लिए पैसे नहीं हैं. A can give its SDR to B and in exchange can get dollars. This is the idea. It is not a currency, it is not a aid, it is no debt. Classification purposes only we mention it in the public debt. Other government debt for classification only, it is not a debt where the money has to be paid. And all of the SDR allocation, there is no money to be paid by this country. So it's not that it is a debt के बाद में देने हैं. When you are getting SDR, then also you don't have to pay. So 2 things, these are different. Allocation के time पे भी कोई cost नहीं है, and it is not a debt. So while allocation, no money to be paid, and also you don't have to return any even in future. It's not a debt, it's not a cost basis allocation. It's a reserve asset which the countries can use for trade, use it for exchanging of currencies. All of the members countries accepted it. This is why SDR was brought in place. SDR allocation does not add to the country's public debt burden. It is shown as part of the gross external debt for the purpose of accounting. SDR allocation supplement foreign exchange reserves. Foreign exchange reserves, one component is SDR. The value of SDR comes from 5 currencies: US dollar, euro, yuan, yen and sterling. And it's not 1-to-1, there is a weighted average. पूरे basket में everyday price will change. Whatever the price of the currencies is, everyday price of SDR will change depending on the 5 currencies. In 2015, yuan was added. Same year, UPSC asked the question, which currency has been included in IMF basket for SDR? Are SDRs allowed for other people also? Or only for countries? There are 20 organizations approved as prescribed holders. There have been number of multilateral, it is not for individuals, it is for these 20 organizations are multilateral organizations. So in addition to participating members, it is also available to multilateral institutions. So it's not just exclusive use of countries. Allocation does not require contributions from budget, cost-free allocation. Now what are the benefits? This is an article which they discussed coming from IMF itself. The Indian government has discussed this, why the benefits of IMF or SDR can be used to replace dollar. This is the same thing they have picked from the article and can come as a question, what are the benefits of SDR? Normal benefits of the SDR is that SDR improves liquidity. It provides you reserves. This reserve can be used for buying currency. So whenever a country gives SDR to another, gets currency, they pay a SDR interest. Understand the concept of SDR interest? जिस भी country के कम हुए as per allocation और जिसके बढ़े, they will get an SDR interest. This SDR interest is 0.005 or 0.05. This SDR interest is fixed by IMF itself. Now what exactly is the benefit? Understand the benefits carefully. It would spread across all countries the seigniorage generated by issuing a global currency. What do you understand by seigniorage? Profit on what? Whenever a currency is printed, the liability is 0. Because currency is not backed by an asset, currency does not have value. But when you issue a currency, you get interest because securities are you're getting from the government. Right now, the global currency is what? Dollar. So that means the seigniorage for global currency is being earned by which country? US. But if you accept SDR, the seigniorage benefits will spread. Is the idea clear? Seigniorage is right now more dollar being printed. US gets the income on printing. Seigniorage is minting of coins पे जो भी आपका profit हुआ. Same of printing of notes. Right now, global currency is what? If more and more countries use SDR in their trade, that means US will not get that seigniorage income. Is the idea clear? It would reduce the demand from emerging economies of foreign exchange reserves as self-insurance. Whenever a country maintains reserves, it has to pay a cost. For example, why foreign exchange reserves are self-insurance? Why is the country maintaining foreign exchange reserves? So that they always have money for balance of payment, and also they can maintain exchange rate stability. But the question is how much reserves they can maintain, how much reserves they should maintain. This is a problem. Because they maintain it in what form? Foreign exchange reserves currencies are in what form? Foreign currency asset. It is in the form of SDR, and it is in the form of reserve tranche position. Now foreign currency asset is mostly in the form of currency. It is in the form of securities of outside countries, and it is in the form of deposits done in commercial banks outside. Commercial or central bank outside. Now, the money which I earn on all of this is not significant. Security पे ही पैसे हैं, उसके अलावा किसी पे पैसे नहीं है. Deposit or security only is giving money, no other source is giving money. But when I use this or when I accumulate the reserves, how is the central bank accumulating reserve? It sells rupees and buys dollar. ऐसी reserve बन रहा है. But when I sell the rupee, this can cause inflation. If this can cause inflation, I will have to now sell government security to absorb this rupee. This government security has an interest. ये earning low है और ये earning high है. This is the cost of maintaining reserve. Also, what money I use to buy the reserve, this money could be utilized for other purposes also. This is the opportunity cost. So there is significant cost involved, but benefit is less. तो ये जो self insurance बनाया है, ये बहुत cost पे आ रहा है. The demand from emerging markets for getting this will reduce if we replace dollar with SDR. So the whole IMF article last year was discussing the concept of how SDR can become a global reserve currency, replacing dollar. If the SDR becomes, this is the benefit you will get. So normal benefit जो SDR के सोचे थे वो liquidity था, additional benefits ये मिल सकते हैं अगर सब countries SDR use करें. Are you getting the idea? Question in the paper could be what are the benefits of using SDR as a global currency? You can get all of this. It would make international monetary system more independent of, yes, right now it's US monetary policy, they are printing, their interest rates are managing everything. So the three benefits you get from making SDR as an international reserve asset. Is the idea clear? Both of these debt initiatives and SDR become the probability becomes high. It has been discussed in detail in that report. How is the country maintaining reserves? Foreign exchange reserves maintain कैसे हो रहे हैं? On the balance of payment, you have current account and capital. In these transactions, if the country has surplus, that means you have surplus of dollar. Your central bank, which is part of your capital account, can buy this dollar by selling rupees in the market. Because whoever will use money in the economy requires rupees, not dollar. So I sold this rupee. I built the reserve. When I sold the rupee in the market, this can trigger. To control this inflation, I sell. On this, you have to pay interest. On foreign exchange reserves, what interest you earn and what interest you pay, this becomes your cost of maintaining reserves. Also, when you use this rupee to buy the dollars, you could have done multiple things with this rupee. For example, you could have given this rupee to the government. The government could have paid its debt. The RBI gives a surplus to government. This we'll discuss in the next class. Gives surplus to the government. Also, the dollar which it has got here, that dollar also can the RBI give to the government. Because RBI का benefit तो कम है. गवर्नमेंट इस डॉलर को यूज के अपनी एक्सटर्नल डेट कम कर दे. RBI is not earning interest, so I'm keeping 600 billion. Why not keep it 300 billion and give this 300 billion to government to give this debt away? क्योंकि जो गवर्नमेंट एक्सटर्नल पे इंटरेस्ट भर रही है ये ज्यादा है, ये कम है. That means this rupee or this dollar has better opportunities. These are the opportunities which are missed. Missed opportunities have a opportunity cost. Cost of missing the opportunity is opportunity cost. So those countries which are accumulating dollars thinking that this is going to provide them confidence to maintain, ये नहीं करना पड़ेगा उनको. Is the idea clear? Anyway, जितना है मार्केट में उतना खरीदते जाओ, कॉस्ट आपको भरनी है. More than $3,000 billion is the reserve with China.
कोई भी कंट्री अगर ज्यादा अमाउंट
डॉलर में ट्रेड हो रहा है, बट दोनों अकाउंट मिला के तो सरप्लस है. People coming in the country with investments and giving loans, this is much more than what the deficit is. तो टोटल तो सरप्लस हो गया, उस सरप्लस से हमने रिजर्व बना लिया. Is the idea clear? Everyone is using SDR, so it's not just about them printing.
Correct.
So SDR is the one currency which is being used. It's not just US getting seigniorage because everyone's using dollar. SDR when has to be converted into local currency, everybody gets the seigniorage.
But sir, seigniorage goes to the issuing authority.
So आपकी कंट्री में SDR तो यूज नहीं होगा ना, कंट्री में तो आपका खुद का करेंसी यूज होगा. So conversion of more currency would give central bank money, not just printing more and more dollar giving to just one country.
सर बट अगर ज़्यादा SDR प्रिंट होगा so वो IMF के पास जाएगा.
IMF is giving SDR to all countries based on whatever the allocation you have. Think this way also. IMF is giving SDR to all countries. From where does the IMF get money? From the countries itself. उसी के हिसाब से SDR है. If the countries are giving money to the IMF, on what form they are giving money? 75% in its own currency. ये कैसे हिल रहा है? 75% in its own currency and 25% in hard currency. तो ये सारा पैसा अगर मैं उनसे लेके more SDR करूं तो किसके पास पैसा आएगा? ये सीनियरेज इज विद whom? प्रिंटिंग करेंसी. अभी तो सारा डॉलर यूज हो रहा है तो सारी सीनियरेज यूएस की है. इज द आइडिया क्लियर हाउ द बेनिफिट्स ऑफ एसडीआर एंड व्हाट आर द कैरेक्टरिस्टिक ऑफ एसडीआर? क्यों? I don't have to significantly get the dollar. SDR is coming from IMF. Dollar is something which I have to get. Or even if I'm getting the SDR, I'm getting the contribution I'm making in my own currency. If everybody starts accepting that paper, why do you need dollar? At the end of the day, currency, if whatever currency you have, why are you holding it? Is it backed by an asset? Does it have value? Does it have value of its own? Is it backed by an asset? It's backed by minimum asset. Right? It's not actually backed by any asset. Same thing you do with SDR. डॉलर का बेनिफिट तो और प्रॉब्लम्स वो सारी यूएस की हैं. SDR will become cumulative. Composition of this multilateral debt mostly taking from IDA, IBRD and ADB. Bilateral debt, Japan, Germany and Russia. Composition of other government debt, SDR, FPI, defense debt and short term. Short term is rupee debt. Short term debt in fact is rupee debt, or if NRIs investing in government securities, that's mostly short term. Government debt. This is the currency composition of government. That was currency composition of total. Currency composition of sovereign government is mostly in dollar and then SDR. It's not rupee. For total country it is dollar and rupee. For government it is US dollar and SDR. There are some definitions given here if you don't understand certain meanings. For example, trade credits, external commercial borrowings, concessional debt, and debt service ratio. We've already discussed debt service ratio. Most of the terms are directly explained. PLFS and the remaining we'll discuss tomorrow. These are the 3 accounts. Rest of the topics PLFS से start होगा. If you just check the document, we have covered till the fiscal policy. Labor data, PLFS, we'll discuss tomorrow. Just read this. If you have any doubts, we'll discuss it next class. Thank you. ये PPT मैं पूरी दे रहा हूँ, इतनी अपलोड करा दो, एडिट करके. हाँ, PLFS का थोड़ा चेंज करके I'll do.